Hello, everybody. Make sure that people. Hello, everybody.
All y'all fine folks in the chat here, thank you for being patient with us.
Oh, here we are.
All right, and now I can see myself on the screen. What's up, everybody? How are we doing tonight? What's up? How are we? Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is actually a very special night because it is the first anniversary stream of AA&E's Infinity and Beyond. It has been a whole year of doing our lovely little live stream for us. So thank you for continuing to be here. This has been such a blast. As you can see, we have a lovely crew here tonight, and we're going to talk about some cool stuff. Um, just in case you are indeed new to the AA&E Infinity and Beyond community, this is an interactive stream about issues that matter to us, the autistic community. So with open minds, let's share our opinions and questions. AA&E is an organization that provides services to autistic folks, their families, and the folks and professionals that support them. You can click the link in the description for more. My name is Liv Gallup. I have worked at AA&E for 7 years now. I've been diagnosed with autism since I was 6. I am turning 31 in 5 days. And I'm published on the intersection of being queer and autistic. So, yeah, I'm excited to jump into things today. Now, our topic today is body liberation and disability justice. And I have some excellent guests here to talk about exactly that. We are joined by Samantha Powers, who is
Yeah.
the president. Yes, president. Is that what it's
Yes,
called?
I'm the president and founder of Bigger Bodies Boston.
Yes.
I'm late diagnosed autistic myself. And I'm a construction industry professional.
Oh wow, very cool. I didn't know that you were experienced with construction stuff as well. That's so cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm a licensed general contractor.
wow. Very cool. Um, and we are also joined by our very own Maggie Bowlby and Jay Evenson Eagler. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So, why don't we start things off by understanding where we each come from a bit more? So, Sam, is it okay if you talk about Bigger Bodies Boston some more? What do you guys do?
Sure.
And like, what is your organization's mission?
So, Bigger Bodies Boston started out just on Instagram in 2021. It's since kind of grown. We are now an official nonprofit. We work towards community building, raising awareness around fat liberation, advocating for people in all body sizes, and, having fun while doing it, hopefully.
That's incredible. I love that so much. Um, I'm not sure when you guys got to be incorporated as a nonprofit, but congratulations on incorporation. That's so cool. Hell yeah.
Yeah, it was just in June.
Oh,
So
wow.
not too
Okay. So that
Very
is
new.
very, I love
Very
that.
new.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Very, very cool. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And then, Jay, you have been on the show before. You are a familiar face to hopefully some here. Could you talk about a little bit of what you do at AA&E and then also your connection to this topic here?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Jay Eagler. I'm a senior manager here with Individual and Family Services at AA&E. I do a variety of things from parent coaching to taking phone calls and connecting people with resources. I also organize some of the stuff that you see us providing here through IFS, such as workshops and live streams on occasion. Um, I am autistic and ADHD, and have identified as fat for many, many years. And as a fat person, embodying my body and also being disabled, physically disabled. I have a very special connection to this topic. I also do some things around this topic, specifically in terms of fat liberation, and I consider myself a fat liberationist.
Excellent. Thank you for all that. I appreciate it. Maggie, hello. You are also a familiar face to lots of folks here on the show. Can you explain what you do here at AANE and also your connection to this movement.
Thank you so much, Liv. Yes, I've been here before chatting about ADHD because I am an ADHDer. Um, and I am the assistant director of individual and family services. So I work directly with both Jay and Liv. And then in my off time, I also work with Sam at Bigger Bodies Boston as a volunteer leader. And as Jay said, I have identified as fat for most of my life. And it's been really interesting. I think that one of the things that made me most excited to talk about this today is that in my work in fat liberation and with Bigger Bodies Boston, I've noticed that things are not as different in these, like, kind of what feels like two different spheres, and that there's actually this huge overlap of people who want community and don't want to feel ostracized. And so I'm just really excited to be here today.
It's so good to have you. And what a notion to end that description on of folks just wanting to have community and not feel ostracized. I think that's something that literally all of us participating here, either in this call or watching, can empathize with. So that's a I think that's a nice notion to kick off on. Now, I actually had this question saved for later, but I wanted to ask first because I think all of you used this as a descriptor. So why is using the word fat important in this context? Because folks have a lot of like very softer, more cushy language, like, to try and not, like, from their perspective, try to not hurt people's feelings. So why just say fat instead? What is important about using that?
Maggie, do you mind if I start?
I don't mind.
All right, so I want to kind of pull it back to autism. So there's a lot of debate around language use within autism, and it is obviously all about the preferred language of the individual. But in studies that have been done in a large part of the community, we have seen that the term autistic as an identifier and as a label is the predominantly preferred language. And in general, when talking about groups of people, it's always best to use the language that's preferred by that group. And so within that debate, you have a lot of people saying, oh, you should use person first language. There's also autistic people or other people who might not like to use identity first language, who really get sick of the debate, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's all about taking the stigma away from the terminology and reclaiming it as an identity and as a description of how our brains function. It's something that cannot be separated from us. And whether you are currently fat or you have been fat in the past, the experience of embodying fatness is with you your whole life. And so for me, that's what it really means. It's, I embody the body that I have, and it describes my body very well, and it also lends itself to a sense of community as an identifying term.
I totally empathize with that, especially that last part, Jay, where you said that it allows you to identify with the community. Um, well, sorry, I'm not going to go on what I think right now because I'd like to get your other everybody's perspective here. But thank you for that descriptor. That felt at home in my heart for sure. Sam and Maggie, would you guys do you guys have other perspectives, things you'd like to comment on this question?
Just to build more on what Jay said, fat is a neutral descriptor, much like autistic, right? And that's what brings a lot of comfort and community around that word, is because of its neutrality. There are a lot of euphemisms for being fat, like there are lots of euphemisms for being autistic. There's lots of coded language, and cutting through that to the core of the issue with a neutral word that is embraced by the people that it applies to is just kind of a no-brainer.
And just to
Right.
piggyback, I think the thing that's most important to me is kind of when I think about like why use the word fat, the phrase that I think many of us have heard in our lives that comes to my brain is, "You're not fat, you're beautiful." And I think that it's important to me to use the word fat to embody the fact that I don't have to be fat or beautiful. And people don't have to be fat or beautiful. And in fact, regardless of whether you deem someone fat, beautiful, something else, they're worthy of dignity and respect. And so just wanting to like Sam said, recognize the neutral descriptor and use it as such is very like empowering and community bringing.
Absolutely. Uh, your description there, Maggie, just made me think of how many times I've heard people say, "Oh, but you don't look autistic," like when I've
Yeah.
disclosed,
Yes.
where it's like it feels very much in the same energy of like
Mhm.
I can either be normal or autistic. Like these things are not mutually exclusive, my friends. Like you can be quote unquote normal, whatever the hell that is, and autistic. You can be beautiful and fat. Like it's all it has similar energy to me. Would you is that seeming accurate to y'all as well? Yeah? Okay.
I'm
Cool, cool,
actually thinking right now. So for folks who don't know, here at AANE, we had a really good conversation a few months back with Dr. Casey Ehrlich and Demi from like, The Bachelor, who is the autistic bachelorette. But one of the things that she mentioned at one point was that like there is an experience, and I've seen this echoed by other people as well, of people who fit the typical societal standards of beauty having their autism diagnosis be invalidated because they are too too attractive to be autistic, and autistic people aren't able to be hot or attractive or beautiful. And that's what it's bringing to my mind. It's something that we also experience as autistic people, especially for autistic people who are assigned female at birth and trans women who are autistic. I think that's something that we very frequently encounter and see.
Absolutely. I have a friend who I want to shout out. I'm not gonna use their name because I didn't get their permission necessarily, but they disclosed to me at one point they were like, my special interest is being hot. Actually, like as part of my spectrumhood, I love like engaging in like beauty and makeup and like clothing and all that stuff. My special interest is being hot, and it's like
There's a
yes,
girl
that
on
makes
TikTok who's
perfect sense to
autistic,
me.
and she does dupes for all of the major beauty products. And like, there's just like so much intersectionality with autism and everything. Yeah.
Absolutely, for sure. Um, so what part of what we want to be um, getting after today is what's called body liberation in general. And I was wondering if you guys had thoughts on what that is. What would you describe body liberation as?
I'm happy to take that one. Uh, I'm personally tend to use the language fat liberation, but it really does apply to all bodies. So body liberation makes a lot of sense. Um, it's essentially, it's almost a civil rights issue in many ways. And it is asking for the same treatment that many other people get already. You know, oftentimes I cannot go to the theater or a sports game, literally because I cannot fit in the seats. It's like just the chair is not made for someone that's like me. And I find it, that's where the disability intersectionality comes into play heavily because in a lot of ways, the physical environment is not built for people of size or of different sizes. It's meant for a more uniform concept of a human, and that's not really how humans work. So, body liberation is essentially asking for what everyone else already has, which is a more even playing field when it comes to housing, employment, medical care, especially. There's quite a few areas where fat people are discriminated against because of their size.
And I think that, so one thing that's important to mention is that August is Fat Liberation Month, which is why we chose this theme today. I don't know if folks know, but part of our process is that we kind of will look at different awareness months, and we'll look at what A&E's theme is. And we had, we looked at August and we were like, oh my gosh, Fat Liberation Month. This is such a great moment to talk about this. And I think that like one really important parallel I'd like to draw is just like specifically that medicalized discrimination, because like similarly to any person who has ever been in a female body or in a body with a uterus and walked into the doctors, you are often not believed or told you're crazy. For larger bodied people, it's often just go lose weight, and there will be a denial of access to testing and to like actual treatment without having like met this attainable thing. And I think that a misconception that's often had within fat liberation is the question, are fat people healthy? And I think fat liberation is to say it doesn't matter, because people, regardless of their health status, are worthy of dignity and medical care. And fatness and body size are actually not a behavior. And that's like part of that kind of misconception, is like people think like fatness is some kind of behavior. Your body size is something like, so just so people know, for people who are trying to change their body size, it's about 3% effective. And so if a doctor handed me a pill and said this, there's a 3% chance that this is effective, and there's a 80% chance that it's going to give you an eating disorder, I might say no thank you to that. And so those are just some of the things I think that are important about body liberation, fat liberation, is understanding, just like women have a right to choose what to do with their bodies in case of pregnancy, people have a right to bodily autonomy and deciding what is right for their body.
Yeah.
Does that happen relatively often, Maggie, where you might be offered a medication where like the actual benefit is like has a minuscule chance of actually changing your body, but then like there's a much bigger chance that it'll like actually like screw you up? Like is that pretty common?
I don't know that doctors are handing out a lot of pills that are 3% effective. Like, I think my point is that they're, oh no, Sam, go ahead. You go.
Well, I was going to bring up, semaglutide, which is currently being prescribed off-label. It is a medicine largely known by Ozempic and Wegovy that, is meant for type 2 diabetes, but also has the side effect of causing weight loss if continued to be taken. The problem with that is as soon as you stop taking that medication, it, all of the weight, all of the changes that you anticipated staying forever don't. And I think that when it comes to this too, it's they often use weight as a proxy, right? And so when they're saying do this, it's pretty much the only time that they're saying that. Like they would never recommend something that fails this often in any other category.
And it's not to say that like semaglutide necessarily fails that amount of time,
Oh
but like
no,
specifically the practice, like there are studies showing that the practice of trying to shrink your body intentionally over a period, when they say like long-term effectiveness, like they're talking about, I highly recommend maintenance phase for anybody looking to learn more about this. But what they're often, maintenance phase is a podcast, sorry, they're often saying that something is long-term effective when it's, and they're only studying about 6 weeks to a year, when what they really show is that any form of intentional weight loss that people engage in, they often end up gaining more weight over time because it's not an effective, actually, like, medicine. And there are lots of things that are labeled as causation, like fatness causes diabetes, but they haven't actually proven that fatness causes diabetes. Diabetes could cause fatness. Like, they don't know these things. And so what it is lazy medicine. Instead of saying, I'm going to run tests and find out what's going on with you, and I'm going to give you access to medication that I know will support you, it's the doctors will gatekeep those tests, and they will gatekeep that medication, and have the person try to prove that they are worthy of the medication by trying to shrink their bodies. And we don't have to, like, spend a ton of time on the medicalized nature of it, but I think that there is a parallel with the experience that many folks have of not being believed at the doctor, or of being told that they don't need a certain test for some reason. Like, that's kind of the take home
Well,
point.
I think that is a great thing to uh, actually continue to go on, because this segues really well into my next question, which was that why is body liberation important? And it sounds like there is a lot of straight up discrimination that goes on um, with um, with larger folks who you know, could, like you said, Maggie, get more thorough care through healthcare if these tests weren't gate kept. Um, and so I had a couple things that I wanted to bring up in light of that. One is have y'all navigated healthcare in like, or sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. How have y'all navigated healthcare and gotten around these gatekeepers? Because I'm sure this comes from experience. What you were talking about, Maggie. And then also, excuse me, sorry. I know that there is a bill in place right now, an act prohibiting body size discrimination. I think it's Bill S1108 in Massachusetts. And if y'all have knowledge of that and would like to talk about it as well, that would be super sweet. So, do you guys have thoughts on the bill? And also, what has your experience been like in navigating healthcare as fat people?
I just kind of want to like just rewind back to the previous question too, because it's going to blend into my answer. Um, so one of the big topics within the autism community is this idea of a neurodiversity paradigm versus a medical paradigm, or the social versus medical model of disability. And I think that really greatly applies here. There's so much about the world that is, you know, deliberately made inaccessible in some cases for people of size. And there is so many parallels between, you know, the world not being built for neurodivergent minds and the world not being built for fat people. That could be talked about more in depth, but to go into the medical question too of navigating that. So, you know, I think back on this time where I was 12 years old. At the time, I think I would have been considered straight size, and I had gotten diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then you fast forward 4 years. At 16, I was struggling with Crohn's disease. I had been put on like prednisone long term. I had gained about, you know, a significant amount of weight at that point. And I was told that I needed to diet by my pediatrician while I was in an active Crohn's flare. And the food she was telling me to eat was not food that I could eat. And it was very, very hard to hear that and at that place in my life. But it felt so invalidating because here I was actually struggling to eat and struggling to do these things and struggling to have enough energy to just exist throughout the day because of that. And I was actively being told to to do something like that. But then came like this period where I had doctors trying to prescribe me medication, like I think at the time it was metformin, with the idea of you could lose weight. And if you don't know anything about metformin, one of the significant side effects is gastrointestinal distress. And when you have Crohn's disease, maybe that might not be something that you want. And in fact, it did actually trigger a flare up for me. But the doctor did not disclose that to me, did not even care that I had that diagnosis. And it made me.
Oh my god, imagine causing damage instead of helping.
Yeah,
What?
it caused so much more drama. And then when I moved here, I had a doctor that told me in the office that I had PCOS because I was fat, when a lot of other data shows that, you know, higher weight is just like a part of PCOS, which would suggest other things. So
there are also thin people with PCOS out in the world.
There are.
We're all rewatching.
Yeah, there are thin people out there with PCOS out there in the world, and not everybody is going to have the same body.
It's almost like how everybody doesn't have the same brain.
Yeah, exactly, or the same experience of a disability, and just all of these little things. And then I also specifically think about navigating that as an autistic person who struggles to advocate for myself sometimes in medical situations. Oftentimes what I get, you know, is I'm just like thinking back onto this, like I had a doctor's office read me their like patient behavioral bill of rights because they didn't like the way that I was behaving. And I was like, did you check my chart? And they said, what do you mean? And I'm like, I just want you to check it real quick. And then they saw autism and they were like, we're so sorry. And it was like, I have difficulty regulating my voice. Like, that's it. I'm not yelling at you, you know, things like that. And they had taken my like cold, like, please do this demeanor to be like very rude. But advocating for myself, especially when it's coming to something like that I'm getting pushback on, has been very, very difficult. But also being believed, right? Like, I think it's compounded when you're autistic as well as fat. You know, you have these doctors who are telling you, oh, well, this is probably because of your weight. You should, you know, just not worry about it. And the reality is that, you know, it can be something pretty serious. Right after I had my daughter, I lost a significant amount of weight because I had just had a baby, and I did that really, really fast and ended up with gallbladder stones. And for those who don't know, rapid, significant weight loss can cause gallbladder stones. And it's a very common postpartum experience. And I brought this up to my doctor 3 times. I even went to the ER for it, and every time they were blaming it on my weight. They were saying that it'll go away once you lose the baby fat. And I finally had a doctor believe me and do an ultrasound, and I was finally able to get that taken care of. But it took me, I want to say, 4 months of agonizing on my bathroom floor every single night. So that level of just like unbelievability is truly there, and you have to learn these self-advocacy skills just to survive.
And like, I think that something that came up for me while we were even talking about these intersections and deciding on this topic for this month is that when I talk to autistic folks and when I talk to neurodivergent folks, I'm giving the same advice as when I talk to other fat people in my life about advocating at the doctor, which is mostly down to the phrase, please document your refusal in my chart. You don't need a referral for a neuropsychologist. You're not autistic, I promise. Please document your refusal to give me a referral in my chart. Oh, you don't need an ultrasound because it'll just go away. Please document your referral to give me an ultrasound in my chart. And it often not always, because it does take, Jay has all those advocacy skills, and it still took Jay a long time to get what they needed. And it's happened to me. I imagine it's happened to Sam. It's not an uncommon experience for people to have to do that really high level advocacy that you wouldn't have to do as a thin person or as a neurotypical person, because of that like lazy medicine.
It makes me wonder what and like this is coming from somebody who I'm less connected with the fat community than you guys are, so forgive me if this is just an uninformed question, but what is medical professionals' obsession with weight? Why is that such a poignant thing for them? It seems like they straight up will neglect you if you're a fat person, and it's like that's like almost like that's like bordering on malpractice. So what is with this? Why is this happening?
I also like, what is this obsession specifically with BMI? Because, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't it start as a like measurement tool for Scandinavian men?
Yeah.
It's a population level tool from over 120 years ago. So, yeah. And it did start with data based on white European males. So, it's
Oh, gee, I wonder where I've heard that before. Maybe my
and I
autistic
think that
diagnostic
really
criteria.
that also stems into why the medical profession, essentially obstetrics and gynecology was started by two white men, right? They took over the birthing process from women of color who had been doing this for centuries and generations. And so, the medicalization of fatness in general is really just tied into white supremacy, racism, and it's essentially a stand-in for what they want you to look like, how they want to enforce this. And yeah, I mean, colonialism.
It's remarkable and unsurprising all at the same time that it all seems to come back to white supremacy by the end of this. Oh my god. Um, yeah.
Great moment to thank the people of color, and they specifically fat women of color who came before us in the fat liberation movement.
Goddamn right.
We did not, white women did not start this movement. Body positivity actually very specifically came from like fat Black women fighting for fat liberation, and body positivity became about just love your body and making people feel, and it's great to love your body, right? But the phrase I like to use is I can't love my body into an airplane seat. So fat liberation is much more about access. And so when you're like, that's kind of just one of the connections to make. And this movement was very much started by Black women.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that for sure. So what how is all of this important to the autistic community? Um, a broader question might be why are body and fat liberation and disability justice intertwined? And I know that you guys have touched on a lot of that already, actually. So whether it has to do with broadly disability justice or specific to the autistic community, how does how would you say that fat liberation applies here? Yeah, how does it apply here for sure?
I mean, for me, I have always been in a larger body for both my age and demographic overall. Um, and I've always been autistic. The two are inextricably linked for me. It very much felt like the external built world around me was not made for someone like me. Much like the schooling process and a lot of the social activities felt like they were not meant for me. You know, everything around me in my life felt like it was not meant to accommodate someone a human of my characteristics, right? And one of the things I now like to remind myself is that fat bodies have always existed, they will always exist. Autistic bodies and brains have always existed and will continue to exist and thrive. And I think the best thing that we can really do is support each other, understand each other, and advocate for justice together, because the intersectionality is really deeply entwined with our success.
With success. Interesting. Yeah, and like just speaking as an autistic person, like I've always had such a dubious relationship with that term success. What does that look like? What are other people trying to impose on me? What does success look like uh, in their eyes so that I might feel valid to them, and then they might not gatekeep these upper echelons of life and
Right.
luxury anymore. And like I just, I I see how all that applies for sure. That definitely hits home to me as an autistic person. Thank you for saying that for sure.
I think also for me, I have a background with an eating disorder, and my autism ties into that pretty heavily. I struggle with ARFID, um, and I struggle with eating regularly, um, and you know that is an area of my life that more fat people have experience with than I know how to count. Um, I think it's I think autism and eating disorders have the highest comorbidity together, if I'm not mistaken. And chances are, if you meet a fat person, they have also dealt with an eating disorder, just based on our society's obsession with diet culture. Um, I don't think I've met a single person who's untouched by that.
Something that just came to my brain, Sam, while you were talking was assumptions and the assumptions that people make. And I think that that's another one of those really strong links. So, I mean, disability justice is a tenet within the fat liberation community. Intersectionality is a tenet within the fat liberation community. And like disability justice is all about access, right? Fat liberation is all about access. And one of the things that makes the world inaccessible is assumptions that people make about autistic people, about fat people, like about a person in any situation. People will assume that people with like a facial difference might also have an intellectual disability. There's all of these assumptions that come with it. People look at a larger bodied person and assume that they could never have an eating disorder, or the only eating disorder that they could ever have is binge eating disorder because of the body that they're in. That's a personal experience that I have. And just like a person may look at a highly masking autistic person and say, you can't possibly be autistic. You can't possibly, or they're looking at someone who is speaking, or they're listening to someone speak and they're making assumptions about what they mean based on their tone of voice. And I think that those just the experience of having people make a lot of assumptions about you with very little knowledge is a very shared fat community, disability community, autistic community experience.
Yeah, I think, and it all goes back to racism, really. So everything is kind of interwoven. You can't have, there is no freedom unless we are all free, you know? So our bodies are constantly going to be this subject of criticism and uh, discrimination in a lot of cases, while there is still racism, because it is one avenue that racism takes, and disability discrimination is still going to heavily impact fat people. It's all interwoven in terms of accessibility. It's all interwoven in terms of systemic discrimination, especially like for fat people. In just kind of like to focus that too. When we talk about discrimination, it is very systemic, but I'd like to point out that it is legal to discriminate against fat people in employment. It is legal for an employer to say, no, I'm not going to hire you, you're too fat. There are countries, to include the United States, that can't even deny a visa for like a work visa to you if you're fat, because they might view you as a burden on their systems. It is.
They can also do that for autism, by the way.
Yeah, they also do that for autism and other disabilities. So it is so interwoven and interconnected, and as long as some form of systemic racism and some form of systemic ableism and some form of systemic fat phobia exists in this world, all of those groups are going to be marginalized.
I'd love to jump back to the legislation that Jay brought up and that Olive mentioned earlier. Currently, the Massachusetts legislature is it died in committee, as they say, and so it won't be brought up again before the legislature until 2025 again. But it's been an issue before the legislature in this state for almost 30 years. And it's something that they've failed to deal with up to this point. So it is still legal in 49 out of 50 states to discriminate based on your weight and your height.
What is the one that doesn't allow this?
Michigan, 1976.
Go Michigan.
Yeah, we say go Michigan. All right.
If you're looking for more information on that, so we have information on our website, which is biggerbodiesboston.com, but then there's also NAFA, which is called the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, and they have something called the Campaign for Size Freedom. I think it was a year or two ago, New York City banned size discrimination, which is amazing. We will give you updates, you know, at BBB about what's happening with that legislation. Several of us actually testified in front of the committee this year. And it went, honestly, it's very interesting because it went as well as it could have. And hi, Toby. Everyone meet Toby. And so it's really interesting. It's a great place to learn more at NAFA's website, which I did just drop in the chat.
Thank you for that. I had two questions left to wrap up tonight, and you can answer either or both in whatever order or at once you feel like. What does it mean to you to be autistic and fat? And then, how can folks live out the principles of fat liberation and disability justice in their daily lives? And I would love to hear examples of how y'all do that as well. So, what does it mean to be autistic and fat to y'all?
I think I gave a lot of my answer before. You know, for me, they're inextricably aligned. But I think when it comes to carrying out in your daily lives, it's especially important if you are a straight size person to combat the things that you see, derogatory remarks about people of size, for instance. Standing up to that as a straight size person can go a lot farther than doing so as a fat person. Doing so as a fat person can often be dangerous. It is exactly like racism in a lot of that discrimination ways. Another small thing that you could do is refuse to get weighed at the doctor's office. If they just put you on the scale, you can say, no, thank you. If they ask why, you can say, is it medically necessary? And they're going to say no, because it's not. Unless there are very specific circumstances with your kidneys or with anesthesia in which it is relevant information. But that is not why they're taking it 9 times out of 10. So they're just little ways that you can move forward. I think continuing to build out your social media as well with people of size can be really helpful.
Yeah, exposing yourself to people in larger bodies is very specifically. Sorry, Jay, I see you. Go ahead.
No worries. For me, it means living in a way that is sort of at odds with what society does consider normal, and in some ways that is for me, something that I really struggle with when I can't fit into a ride at Six Flags, or I can't fit into a booth at a restaurant. But in many, many other ways, it's very good. I find community this way. I find a sense of purpose in this. And I think one of the biggest ways that people can really combat fat phobia and engage in fat liberation is to exist authentically as themselves, to not let their body hold them back from doing the things that they want to do, or rather their fear of society's perception of their body, I think, is a better way of putting that. You know, I, for the longest time, did not go hiking or swimming or do things that I actively enjoyed because I wanted to hide my body away because I was ashamed of it. And through body positivity and acceptance and fat liberation, I have found so much more purpose in my life, and also so much more pride in the body that has kept me alive for 30 years and that has built an entire baby and that has done so much and overcome so much to get me here today, that I don't feel like I have to hide anymore. So living authentically as yourself, making yourself visible, doing things that you enjoy is the best way to embody fat liberation, in my opinion.
I will also say eating. Eating is a great way
I
to
love you.
embody fat liberation. Because I think that, like, truly and honestly, when we experience, so like Sam was saying, expose yourself to bodies bigger than yours and find things you like about them. That is a great way to start building your kind of fat liberation mindset, following fat folks and being like, wow, there's a lot of beauty here. But also eating, because as Sam was saying, so many of us do have restrictive eating disorders at times when we don't feel like it's okay to eat. And watching those comments that sometimes I think are so ingrained, especially in women, to say like, oh, like, I earned this ice cream, or, I'm excited to have ice cream, it's my cheat day. Like, trying to dial back those comments and just allow yourself to eat. Or if you are eating, just, you don't have to say anything about it. Like, you don't have to comment on what you're eating or what other people are eating. And that, to me, is a way to help folks in all body sizes who are experiencing feelings around food, which is happening in all communities, specifically the autistic and the fat communities. And when we do model, just like how we tell autistic folks, say what you need, ask for what you need, doing the same thing in a larger body, or noticing. A great thing that people can do is notice when the chairs have arms somewhere. And if you're going with a fat friend, make alternate arrangements for seating, or ask for the seat for them, or just don't make it a big deal if a fat person does say, hey, can I swap out this chair? These are all great ways to be an ally.
So much of what y'all said it rings true to um, how my autism and transness intertwine, where I feel like I have to hide my body sometimes because of the stigma associated with looking like a man. And I know that these are entirely different issues, but when it comes down to how we are perceived and what are the beauty norms in our society, it is frankly oppressive how we're looked at and how we're treated as such. Um, and thank you all for describing all of this in such detail. I appreciate you definitely sharing your perspectives here. Um, and also, let's see, Maggie, you mentioned NAFA. Are there other similar groups that folks should follow? Are there social media accounts that people should follow? Where can we find awesome body positivity people?
So there's a bunch of groups all over the country. There are some international groups as well. NAFA keeps a list, but Bigger Bodies Boston also follows the vast majority of them on Instagram. So if you want to just check out social media, you could easily find a group like ours or adjacent to ours anywhere across the country at the moment. And locally in Massachusetts, there's several, to Jay's point, outdoor access clubs that are meant for disability and fat justice. So, Access Outdoors and the Body Liberation Hiking Club are both groups that provide access to the outdoors for people who may not be able to do so otherwise.
I think Body Liberation Hiking also has branches
They
like
do, yeah.
around the country.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people are in the Boston area, like swimming. Bigger Bodies Boston has a pool party coming up on August 24th. The information is on our website, which is linked in the show notes, is what just came into my brain. Like I'm a podcaster, which I'm not. Linked in the description.
I also have on the screen for viewers, if you want to view, there are some QR codes to take you right to the Bigger Bodies Boston website, right to the NAFA website, and also to browse our support groups and upcoming workshops. Every major city or even region will have some sort of fat liberation group, hopefully. For those who are in Massachusetts, but maybe not on the Boston side, there is the Fat Babes of Western Mass, and other such groups throughout Massachusetts.
I just will note that I can't speak for every single group because I don't have personal experience with all of them. But as I said at the beginning of the stream, in my experience, when you are finding a fat accepting space, you are also likely to find a neuro affirming space and a queer affirming space, very specifically. These communities are so much smaller than we think that, or like, they're so connected and they're so intertwined. Like my doula is a neuro spicy fat person. Like it's just there's so many folks. I believe they're also queer. Like so there is so much intersection between these communities that it's really beautiful to find community in any one of these areas.
100%. Absolutely. Um, is there anything that anybody had that comments y'all might have been holding on to that you want to say before we wrap up for tonight? Super duper.
Thank you so
Well,
much for
thank you
having
all so
us.
much. Yeah, gosh, oh my, no, thank you for being here. Like, thank you for this incredibly enlightening and empowering conversation. I appreciate
Thank you
y'all.
for such great questions, Liv, too.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure. I'm glad they were. Um, yeah, thank you all so much. This has been truly like eye and heart opening. So I appreciate y'all very much. Thank you. And as for everybody else, thank you for joining us in tonight's live stream. We here at AA&E once again are an organization that help um, autistic adults as well as the families and professionals that support them. There's more info in the description. And from all of us, thank you very much for being here and have a nice night.
Thanks, everybody.